The morning coffee had barely cooled in Admiral Rebecca Torres's mug when the alarms began screaming across Luna Station. Every screen in the command center flashed red warnings as massive energy signatures appeared throughout the solar system. What started as a routine Tuesday morning had become humanity's darkest hour. 67 alien warships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation around Earth. Each vessel stretched over 2 kilometers in length, their dark metal hulls bristling with weapons that could glass entire continents. The sheer size of the fleet made Earth's combined military forces look like toys in comparison. Lieutenant Commander Alex Reed burst through the command center doors, his uniform still wrinkled from sleep. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. On all frequencies, it's coming from the largest vessel." Torres nodded grimly. She had expected this moment for years, though she had hoped it would never come. The United Earth Defense Force had prepared for first contact, but not like this. These were not explorers or diplomats. These were conquerors. The main display flickered to life, revealing a massive reptilian creature with golden scales and burning red eyes. 4 arms extended from its muscular torso, each ending in claws that could tear through steel. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Primitive humans of the 3rd planet," the creature began, its words translated by some advanced technology. "I am Warlord Gorth of the Hegemony of Worlds. Your species has been selected for integration into our empire. You will surrender all military assets, disarm your defenses, and prepare for occupation. You have 72 hours to comply." Torres felt her blood run cold. The hegemony was legendary throughout known space, a collection of conquered worlds ruled with an iron fist. They had absorbed 47 different species over the past 3 centuries, each one added to their vast military machine. "Resistance is futile," Gorth continued, his scaled lips pulling back to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your ships cannot match our speed. Your technology is 300 years behind our weakest vessels. Accept your fate with dignity, and your people will be treated as valued slaves rather than vermin to be exterminated." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Reed stared at the tactical display showing the enemy positions. "Admiral, our combined fleet has maybe 200 ships. Most of them are patrol vessels and cargo haulers. Against their dreadnoughts, we wouldn't last 6 hours." Torres walked to the massive window overlooking Earth. The blue marble hung in space below, completely unaware of the threat surrounding it. 3 billion people going about their daily lives, not knowing that alien warships were preparing to enslave them all. But something bothered her about the alien transmission. For a species that claimed complete superiority, Gorth had seemed strangely nervous. His eyes had darted around as if expecting attack from multiple directions. The tactical officer beside him kept checking sensor readings with obvious anxiety. "Reed, pull up all our intelligence on hegemony tactics," Torres ordered. "I want to know how they've conquered other worlds." The data painted a grim picture. The hegemony always followed the same pattern. They would arrive with overwhelming force, demand immediate surrender, and give their targets just enough time to realize resistance was hopeless. Most species capitulated within hours. Those who fought were crushed so completely that word spread throughout the galaxy about the futility of opposing the hegemony. Yet something felt wrong. Torres had spent 30 years in military intelligence before taking command of Luna Station. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now they were screaming that the aliens were hiding something. "Admiral, we're detecting strange energy. Readings from the outer system," reported Ensign Lisa Park from the sensor station. "Multiple gravitational anomalies near the asteroid belt. They're very faint, almost like shadows." Torres frowned. "Natural phenomena?" "Unknown, sir. The patterns are too regular to be random, but too subtle to be ships. Our sensors can barely detect them." Before Torres could respond, her secure communication system chimed with an incoming message. The encryption was unlike anything she had seen before, using quantum entanglement protocols that officially didn't exist. When she accepted the transmission, a single line of text appeared on her screen. "Condition Omega authorized. Shadow assets standing by for deployment. Await further instructions. Project Lazarus sends regards. Torres felt her heart skip a beat. Project Lazarus was a name from classified briefings she had received years ago. A black-budget program so secret that most world leaders didn't know it existed. She had assumed it was just another military research project, one of hundreds that consumed taxpayer money with little to show for it. But the quantum encryption suggested otherwise. Someone had been preparing for this exact scenario, building capabilities that existed completely outside official channels. The question was whether these shadow assets were real or just desperate wishful thinking. Admiral, Earth Defense Command is requesting immediate conference with all senior staff, Reed reported. They want to discuss surrender terms. Torres looked back at Earth, then at the alien fleet holding her world hostage. 67 ships against humanity's combined forces. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Any sane military commander would begin negotiating the best possible terms for surrender. But the mysterious message had changed something. If Project Lazarus was real, if shadow assets actually existed, then humanity might have options the aliens didn't know about. The key was buying time without revealing any hidden capabilities. Tell Earth Command I'll join the conference in 1 hour, Torres decided. And Reed, I want you to dig deeper into those gravitational anomalies. Use every sensor array we have. Look for patterns, energy signatures, anything that might explain what we're detecting. Yes, sir. Should I coordinate with Earth-based observatories? No. Keep this internal to Luna Station for now. And Reed, if anyone asks what you're doing, tell them we're trying to map safe evacuation routes through the asteroid belt. As Reed hurried to carry out her orders, Torres remained at the window. Somewhere in the darkness between worlds, something was waiting. Whether it was salvation or just shadows remained to be seen. But for the first time since the alien fleet had arrived, she felt a spark of hope. The aliens had given humanity 72 hours to surrender. That might be just enough time to discover whether humanity's hidden guardians were real or just another government pipe dream. Either way, Earth's fate would be decided not by politicians making deals, but by whatever lurked in the spaces between the stars. The countdown had begun, and Torres intended to make every second count. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Michael Horn watched quantum equations dance across holographic displays, while the world above prepared to surrender to alien invaders. The underground facility stretched for kilometers through solid rock, hidden from every satellite and sensor humanity had ever built. For 23 years, he had overseen the most classified project in human history, and today, all that secret work would finally be tested. The laboratory hummed with exotic energy as massive generators powered technologies that existed nowhere else in human space. Quantum masking fields created pockets of twisted space-time that could hide entire fleets from detection. Collapsed matter reactors produced ammunition that could punch through any known material. Reality manipulation engines bent the laws of physics to create weapons that worked more like magic than science. Dr. Amy Sato hurried between control stations, her fingers flying over interfaces that would have baffled the greatest minds at any public university. Michael, the Shadow Fleet is reporting full readiness across all 50 vessels. Quantum cloaking is stable at 100% efficiency. They're completely invisible to conventional sensors. Horn nodded without looking away from his displays. The Shadow Fleet represented humanity's darkest contingency plan, born from a simple, terrifying question posed by a secret committee in 2387. What if Earth faced an enemy so powerful that the planet's survival required weapons that officially could never exist? The committee had been formed after analyzing every alien encounter in human history. Crashed ships that governments quietly recovered, strange artifacts found in deep space, energy signatures that defied explanation, advanced materials that suggested technologies far beyond human capability. Someone had been visiting Earth for decades, leaving behind breadcrumbs of impossible science. Project Lazarus had been tasked with reverse engineering everything, not for peaceful exploration or scientific advancement, but for one specific purpose: creating weapons that could destroy enemies humanity couldn't hope to match in conventional warfare. The project existed completely outside normal government oversight, funded through accounting tricks and hidden budget allocations that no politician would ever discover. Dr. Horn, we're receiving authentication codes from Luna Station, reported Technician David Walsh from the Communications Array. Admiral Torres is requesting immediate deployment authorization for all shadow assets. Horn smiled grimly. Torres was one of only 12 people who knew Project Lazarus existed. Her security clearance had been granted not by any government agency, but by the Shadow Committee that actually controlled humanity's deepest secrets. If she was activating Condition Omega, the situation above ground had become desperate enough to risk exposure. Grant the authorization, Horn ordered, and patch me through to Shadow 1. The communication system connected him to Captain David. Cross aboard the stealth destroyer Phantom, flagship of humanity's invisible armada. Cross had volunteered for the Shadow Fleet 5 years ago, knowing he might spend the rest of his life fighting enemies that officially didn't exist. His crew was composed entirely of volunteers who had vanished from official records, becoming ghosts in service of Earth's survival. Shadow 1 here. Cross's voice crackled through quantum-encrypted channels. We've been monitoring the alien fleet, 67 vessels in standard occupation formation. They're confident, probably expecting easy surrender based on previous conquests. What's your assessment, Captain? Horn asked. They're using energy signatures consistent with hegemony technology from our intelligence files. Standard shields, conventional weapons, predictable tactics, nothing we haven't prepared for. The real question is whether our exotic weapons will perform as designed against live targets. Horn understood the concern. The Shadow Fleet's weapons were based on theoretical science and reverse-engineered alien technology. They had been tested against simulated targets and captured alien materials, but never against active enemy vessels in real combat conditions. Today would prove whether 23 years of secret research could actually save humanity. Captain, you are authorized for full deployment. Rules of engagement are total war. Show no mercy and leave no survivors who might report our capabilities to other hegemony worlds. Make them disappear so completely that the galaxy will think Earth is protected by ghosts. Understood, Doctor. Shadow Fleet moving to attack positions. Across the solar system, 50 invisible ships began their final approach to Earth. Each vessel was a masterpiece of impossible engineering, combining human ingenuity with alien science to create something that should not exist. The smallest were corvettes the size of modern destroyers, equipped with quantum torpedoes that could bypass shields entirely. The largest were battleships that dwarfed anything in Earth's official navy, armed with collapsed matter cannons that could crack moons. The Phantom itself was a marvel of stealth technology. Its hull was composed of metamaterials that bent light around the ship, making it completely invisible to optical sensors. Quantum masking fields twisted space-time to hide the vessel's gravitational signature. Exotic matter reactors produced no detectable emissions. For all practical purposes, the ship existed in a pocket dimension that touched normal space, only when its crew chose to reveal themselves. Captain Cross stood in the Phantom's bridge, watching tactical displays show the positions of both the alien fleet and his own shadow vessels. His crew had trained for this scenario countless times, but simulation was different from reality. Today they would discover whether humanity's secret guardians were truly ready for war against impossible odds. Sir, all shadow vessels report, ready for engagement, his tactical officer whispered. Even aboard their own ship. The crew spoke quietly, as if afraid their voices might somehow reveal their presence to enemy sensors. Weapon status? Cross asked. Collapsed matter cannons, charged to full capacity, quantum torpedo tubes loaded with reality-bending warheads, point defense systems armed with probability manipulation fields. We're carrying enough firepower to crack a planet, all of it completely invisible to their sensors. Cross nodded. The Shadow Fleet's weapons defied everything humanity thought it knew about physics. Collapsed matter existed in a state that was technically not matter at all, allowing it to pass through shields as if they didn't exist. Quantum torpedoes existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them impossible to track or intercept. Reality-bending technology created localized distortions in space-time that could crush enemy vessels like tin cans. Captain, we're receiving final authorization from Earth Command, his communications officer reported. All government forces are standing down. Official surrender will be broadcast in 6 hours. We are weapons-free for Operation Blackout. Cross felt a cold smile cross his face. Operation Blackout was the Shadow Fleet's response to overwhelming invasion. Strike without warning, destroy without mercy, and vanish before the enemy could understand what had happened. The aliens expected to face Earth's pathetic official military. Instead, they would encounter humanity's darkest secrets made manifest. All vessels, this is Shadow 1. Cross-broadcast on encrypted channels that existed in folded spacetime. Today, we are the answer to prayers that could never be spoken aloud. We are the sword hidden in darkness, the guardian that protects while sleeping children dream safely. The aliens came expecting sheep. Instead, they have found wolves who hunt between the stars. 50 invisible ships acknowledged his words and moved into final attack positions. The hegemony fleet continued their leisurely approach to Earth, completely unaware that death was already among them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In a few hours, they would learn that some prey had hidden fangs and that humanity's greatest strength was the enemies they never saw coming. The emergency session of Earth's Unified Defense Council had lasted 18 hours, and exhaustion showed on every face around the conference table. President Maria Santos of the Global Federation rubbed her temples as the final votes were tallied. The decision was unanimous, though it left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. Earth would surrender unconditionally to the hegemony of worlds. General Robert Kim, the highest-ranking military officer present, cleared his throat before speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, I've run every simulation our computers can handle. Our combined fleets cannot achieve better than a 12% probability of destroying even one enemy vessel before complete annihilation. The mathematics are brutal but clear. Defense Minister Hassan al-Rashid nodded grimly. The civilian casualties from orbital bombardment would reach 800 million in the first hour alone. We cannot ask our people to die for a war that cannot be won. What none of them knew was that Admiral Torres had not attended the session in person. Her holographic projection had voted with the others while she remained on Luna Station, coordinating with shadows that officially did not exist. The real Rebecca Torres was watching tactical displays that showed 50 invisible ships moving into position around the unsuspecting alien fleet. Mr. President, Admiral Torres has confirmed that all Earth Defense Force vessels will power down weapons and shields as required. General Kim reported, "We'll broadcast our surrender on all frequencies in 30 minutes. President Santos stood, slowly, feeling the weight of 3 billion lives on her shoulders. Then God help us all. History will judge whether we chose wisdom or cowardice, but at least there will be a history to write." Across the solar system, Warlord Gorth lounged in his command throne aboard the massive dreadnought Skull Crusher. The past 2 days had unfolded, exactly as expected. The humans had blustered and threatened, held emergency meetings and made desperate plans, but ultimately reached the same conclusion as every other species the hegemony had conquered. Resistance was futile when the enemy held overwhelming superiority. "Warlord, we're receiving the human surrender broadcast," reported his communications officer, a 6-armed insectoid creature called Vex. "All their military vessels are powering down weapons and shields. Planetary defenses are going offline." Gorth's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. Predictable mammals. They always follow the same pattern. Panic, desperation, false bravado, then acceptance of their fate. Deploy the occupation fleet to take control of their major population centers. The hegemony vessels moved with casual confidence toward Earth, their shields reduced to minimum power to conserve energy for the long occupation ahead. Why waste resources defending against an enemy that had already surrendered? The humans had proven themselves to be typical prey species, all bluster and no bite when faced with real predators. But hidden in the asteroid belt, Captain Cross watched the enemy fleet's movement with predatory satisfaction. The aliens were doing exactly what the Shadow Fleet's tactical computers had predicted. Overconfidence was making them sloppy, their formations loose, and their defenses minimal. "All vessels, confirm targeting solutions on primary objectives," Cross whispered into his quantum communicator. The Phantom's bridge was tomb quiet. Every crew member focused on displays showing invisible death surrounding the unsuspecting alien fleet. "Shadow 7 has targeting lock on the lead battlecruiser," came the first reply. "Shadow 12 confirming quantum torpedo solutions on enemy flagship," reported another invisible vessel. One by one, 50 ships confirmed they had selected targets and were ready to unleash weapons that existed in the spaces between dimensions. The trap was set, and the prey was moving directly into the killing zone. Cross checked his chronometer. Earth's official surrender would be broadcast in 8 minutes. The alien fleet would be in optimal position for maximum destruction in exactly 10 minutes. Timing was critical. Strike too early and some enemies might escape to warn the galaxy about humanity's hidden capabilities. Strike too late and the occupation would begin, making it impossible to eliminate all witnesses. Captain, alien vessels are reducing speed and entering standard occupation formation, his tactical officer reported. They're clustering around Earth's major continents exactly as projected. Perfect. The Shadow Fleet's battle plan relied on the aliens following their standard playbook. By concentrating their forces around population centers, they were creating target-rich environments where invisible attackers could achieve maximum destruction with minimum effort. Shadow Fleet, this is Shadow 1, cross-broadcast on channels that existed in folded space-time. The enemy is approaching optimal firing position. All vessels prepare for synchronized attack. Remember, we are ghosts seeking vengeance for crimes not yet committed. Today we remind the galaxy why predators should fear the dark spaces between stars. On Luna Station, Admiral Torres watched Earth's surrender broadcast go live on every communication channel humanity possessed. President Santos appeared on screens throughout the solar system, her voice heavy with defeat as she announced humanity's capitulation to alien rule. Citizens of Earth, the president began, after careful consideration of our alternatives, the Unified Defense Council has voted to accept the terms offered by the hegemony of worlds. All military resistance will cease immediately. We ask all personnel to comply with occupation forces and pray that our surrender will minimize civilian casualties. Aboard the Skull Crusher, Warlord Gorth watched the human leader's pathetic submission with satisfaction. Another world added to the hegemony's collection, another species broken and ready for exploitation. His tactical display showed the occupation, fleet moving into final position around Earth's continents. Excellent. Order all vessels to begin orbital insertion. I want ground forces on every continent within 6 hours, Gorth commanded. And prepare the slave processing centers. 3 billion new workers will significantly boost our industrial capacity. But even as he gave orders for Earth's occupation, some primitive instinct was nagging at the back of his reptilian brain. His sensor officer, a crystalline being called, Vel kept reporting minor gravitational anomalies throughout the system. Nothing threatening, just tiny distortions that might indicate debris fields or unusual asteroid formations. Vel, explain these sensor ghosts again, Gorth demanded, his red eyes narrowing. Unknown, Warlord. The signatures are too faint to be ships, too regular to be natural phenomena. Our computers classify them as sensor errors, but they're persistent throughout the system. Gorth felt his scales tighten with unease. In 2 centuries of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something felt wrong about this system, though he couldn't identify what. The humans had surrendered exactly as expected. Their military was standing down on schedule, and no threats appeared on any sensor display. But somewhere in the darkness, between worlds, 50 invisible predators were counting down the seconds until Operation Blackout began. The Shadow Fleet had waited 23 years for this moment, and now it was finally time to show the galaxy what humanity could accomplish when survival demanded the impossible. All vessels report final targeting solutions confirmed. Crosses, tactical officer whispered. Quantum weapons charged to full capacity. Reality-bending warheads armed and ready. We are weapons-free in 60 seconds. Cross felt cold satisfaction flow through his veins. The aliens had taken the bait perfectly, clustering their forces in exactly the positions that would maximize casualties while minimizing survivors. In 1 minute, the hegemony would discover that some species had hidden fangs, and that humanity's surrender had been nothing more than the ultimate trap. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when the hegemony battlecruiser Iron Fist simply disappeared. One moment the massive vessel was descending toward North America. The next moment debris was spreading through space where 2 kilometers of alien warship had existed seconds before. No explosion, no energy discharge, no warning of any kind. The ship was there, then it was gone. Warlord Gorth stared at his tactical display in disbelief as more red icons began vanishing from the screen. The dreadnought Bloodstorm ceased to exist while approaching Europe. The heavy cruiser Starkiller became expanding clouds of metal fragments over Asia. In the space of 30 seconds, 12 vessels had been destroyed by attacks that his sensors couldn't even detect. "What's happening?" Gorth roared, his forearms gripping his command throne as the Skull Crusher shuddered under some invisible impact. "Where are these attacks coming from?" His sensor officer Vel manipulated crystalline controls with desperate speed, but the displays showed only emptiness where death was striking from all directions. "Warlord, sensors detect no enemy vessels, no energy weapons, no projectiles of any kind. Our ships are being destroyed by forces that do not register on any known detection system." Another massive explosion lit up space as the battleship Bone Crusher was torn apart by weapons that existed in dimensions beyond normal spacetime. The Shadow Fleet had opened fire with perfect coordination, 50 invisible ships unleashing exotic weapons that turned the basic laws of physics into suggestions rather than absolute rules. Captain Cross stood on the Phantom's bridge, watching tactical displays that showed the systematic destruction of an entire invasion fleet. His collapsed matter cannons fired projectiles that technically weren't matter at all, allowing them to pass through shields as if they were empty space before, returning to normal matter inside enemy hulls. The results were devastating and impossible to defend against. Direct hit on target Alpha 7. His weapons officer reported with quiet satisfaction. Enemy battlecruiser eliminated with single shot. No survivors detected. "Quantum torpedoes. Away," called another crew member. Reality-bending warheads armed and tracking multiple targets. The Shadow Fleet's attack was perfectly choreographed destruction. Invisible ships appeared just long enough to deliver killing blows before vanishing back into folded spacetime. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously struck targets that thought they were safely shielded. Probability manipulation weapons created localized zones where the chance of survival became mathematically zero. Aboard the dying alien vessels, crews struggled to understand attacks that defied every principle of warfare they knew. Energy weapons that couldn't be blocked. Projectiles that appeared inside their ships without penetrating the hulls. Explosions that seemed to originate from twisted space itself rather than conventional explosives. "This is impossible," screamed the captain of the heavy cruiser Deathwing, as his ship was torn apart by forces that existed in the spaces between atoms. No species has technology this advanced, but his protests were cut short as reality-bending minds created a localized implosion that crushed his vessel like an empty can. The Shadow Fleet had spent 23 years preparing for exactly this scenario, and every weapon had been designed to ensure that no enemy would survive to report humanity's true capabilities. Shadow 12 to Shadow 1 came a transmission on quantum encrypted channels. Primary target eliminated, moving to secondary objective. Shadow 7 reporting successful strike on enemy flagship's escort group. 4 vessels destroyed. No survivors. Cross watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction as red icons disappeared one by one from his screen. The hegemony fleet that had seemed so overwhelming just minutes before was being systematically eliminated by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and couldn't fight. All vessels maintain operational security. Cross broadcast to his invisible fleet. No ship remains visible for more than 5 seconds. Strike hard, strike fast, and vanish before return fire can be attempted. We are ghosts seeking vengeance, and ghosts leave no witnesses. The Shadow Fleet's hit-and-run tactics were proving devastatingly effective. Stealth destroyers would materialize beside enemy vessels, unleash their entire arsenal at point-blank range, then disappear before the explosions had finished expanding. Heavy cruisers equipped with quantum cannons would fire through dimensional rifts, their weapons appearing inside enemy ships without crossing the space in between. Warlord Gorth watched his invasion fleet die around him with growing horror. Of 67 vessels, only 19 remained operational, and that number was dropping rapidly as invisible attackers continued their systematic slaughter. His own flagship had been hit 3 times by weapons that his engineers couldn't identify or counter. All vessels emergency withdrawal, Gorth broadcast on all frequencies. Retreat to minimum safe distance and prepare for hyperspace jump. But the Shadow Fleet had anticipated this reaction. As surviving alien ships tried to disengage, they found their escape routes blocked by invisible mines that created gravity, wells strong enough to trap entire battleships. Quantum field generators twisted local spacetime to prevent hyperspace jumps. The aliens were trapped in a killing zone, with no way to escape. Unknown attackers, Gorth broadcast desperately on all channels. Identify yourselves. We demand to know who dares challenge the hegemony of worlds. The response came from every direction at once, transmitted by ships that remained completely invisible to all sensors. The voice was human, cold as vacuum, and carried the weight of absolute judgment. We are the Shadow Fleet of the Terran Defense. Corp, you came to our world demanding surrender. You threatened our people with slavery and death. Now you have found the answer that waits in darkness for all predators who mistake mercy for weakness. Cross paused the transmission for a moment, watching more enemy vessels die under fire from weapons that shouldn't exist. When he continued, his words carried across the entire system, reaching every surviving alien crew member. Your hegemony has conquered 47 worlds through overwhelming force and brutality. You have enslaved billions of sentient beings because no one could stand against your fleets. Today you learn that some species have prepared for your arrival. Some prey have evolved hidden fangs. Another massive explosion lit up space as quantum torpedoes struck the heavy battleship Gore Render. The vessel's shields might as well have been tissue paper against weapons that existed partially in parallel dimensions. The ship's hull cracked like an eggshell before collapsing into a singularity that consumed everything within a kilometer radius. You have one opportunity to carry a message back to your masters, Cross continued, his voice reaching the handful of alien vessels still capable of retreat. Tell them that Earth is protected by forces they cannot comprehend. Tell them that humanity has guardians who strike from shadows and leave no trace of their passage. Tell them that any fleet sent against us will simply disappear, and that the galaxy will think Earth is protected by ghosts. Of the mighty hegemony invasion fleet, only 7 vessels remained intact enough for hyperspace travel. These battered survivors limped away from Earth's solar system, their crews traumatized by encounters with weapons that violated every law of physics they understood. They carried with them stories that would spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Behind them, the Shadow Fleet vanished back into the darkness between stars, their existence once again officially denied. 50 invisible ships returned to hidden bases in the asteroid belt, their quantum cloaking making them indistinguishable from empty space. The only evidence of their presence was the expanding debris clouds, where an entire invasion fleet had once existed. Admiral Torres stood on Luna Station, watching the last alien vessels flee toward the edge of the solar system. Around her, the command staff stared in shock at displays showing the complete annihilation of forces that had seemed unstoppable just hours before. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Reed whispered, "What just happened? How did we destroy an entire hegemony fleet?" Torres smiled for the first time in days. "Sometimes the best defense is an offense that nobody sees coming, Reed. And sometimes the greatest strength is the enemy that remains hidden until the perfect moment to strike." The Shadow Fleet had spoken, and the galaxy would remember. 3 months after the hegemony's failed invasion, the story had already spread to every corner of known space. In the shadowy cantinas of Proxima Station, alien traders whispered about the shadow demons of Terra, who struck without warning from invisible ships. On the mining worlds of the Centauri system, workers told tales of human guardians who could bend reality itself to destroy their enemies. The truth had become legend, and the legend was growing with each retelling. Warlord Gorth sat in chains aboard a hegemony prison transport, his golden scales dulled by shame and defeat. Of the 7 ships that had escaped Earth's solar system, only his battered flagship had made it back to hegemony space. The others had suffered critical failures during hyperspace transit, their crews driven mad by weapons that continued to affect their minds long after the battle had ended. The hegemony high command had not been pleased with his report. An entire invasion fleet destroyed by invisible attackers using impossible technology. weapons that ignored shields and armor, ships that appeared and vanished at will. The story sounded like the ravings of a broken mind, except that the evidence was undeniable. 60 ships had gone to conquer Earth. Only one had returned. You claim the humans have developed cloaking technology superior to our own, Grand Admiral Corax had demanded during Gorth's court-martial. You insist they possess weapons that violate the fundamental laws of physics. Yet our intelligence reports show a primitive species with crude nuclear weapons and conventional spacecraft. Gorth had tried to explain what he had witnessed, but the words sounded insane even to his own ears. How could he describe weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously? How could he convince anyone that ships could become one with the void itself, striking from nowhere and vanishing without trace? The humans call them the Shadow Fleet, he had repeated desperately. Ships that hunt in the darkness between stars. They warned me to carry a message back to the hegemony. They said any fleet sent against Earth will simply disappear. But his words had fallen on deaf ears. The hegemony had conquered too many worlds through overwhelming force to believe that any species could develop defenses against their military might. Plans were already being made for a second invasion, this time with triple the number of ships and weapons specifically designed to counter stealth technology. What the hegemony didn't know was that their every communication was being monitored by quantum listening posts hidden throughout space. Dr. Michael Horn sat in his underground laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps, reading intercepted transmissions with growing concern. The aliens were planning another attack, and this time, they would come prepared for invisible enemies. Amy, bring up the production schedules for the Shadow Fleet expansion program, he ordered his assistant. If the hegemony wants to test our defenses again, we need to be ready with more ships and better weapons. The secret facilities hidden throughout the solar system had been operating at maximum capacity since the first invasion. New vessels were being constructed using even more advanced reverse-engineered technology. Scientists who had spent decades studying impossible artifacts were finally free to use their knowledge without restrictions. The Shadow Fleet was growing stronger with each passing day. Quantum cloaking systems had been improved to make ships invisible to sensors that existed in parallel dimensions. Collapsed matter weapons now fired projectiles that could exist in up to 7 different realities simultaneously. Reality-bending technology had evolved to create localized zones where the laws of physics could be rewritten at will. Captain Cross stood on the bridge of the newly completed stealth battleship Wraith, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on the most advanced vessel humanity had ever built. The ship was twice the size of the Phantom, but somehow even more invisible to detection. Its weapons could crack moons or strip the electrons from individual atoms with equal ease. Captain, we're receiving priority communication from Earth Command, his new communications officer reported. The crew of the Wraith was composed entirely of volunteers who had died officially, their deaths faked so they could serve aboard ships that didn't exist. Put it through, Cross ordered. Admiral Torres appeared on his screen, her expression serious but determined. Captain, intelligence reports suggest the hegemony is planning a second invasion within 6 months. They're assembling a fleet of over 200 vessels equipped with advanced sensor arrays designed to counter stealth technology. Cross smiled coldly. Let them come. The original Shadow Fleet destroyed 67 ships without taking a single casualty. Now we have 140 vessels, each one more advanced than anything that existed during the first battle. That's not the only concern, Torres continued. The story of our invisible fleet has spread throughout the galaxy. Other species are starting to ask questions. Some want to ally with us for protection. Others see us as a potential threat that needs to be eliminated before we become too powerful. Cross nodded thoughtfully. Success had brought unexpected complications. The Shadow Fleet had been designed to operate in complete secrecy, but their victory over the hegemony had made Earth famous throughout known space. Keeping their capabilities hidden was becoming increasingly difficult. What are your orders, Admiral? Continue expansion of the Shadow Fleet, but prepare for multiple scenarios. The hegemony isn't our only potential enemy anymore. Intelligence suggests at least 3 other major powers are considering preemptive strikes against Earth. After the transmission ended, Cross stared out at the construction yards hidden in the asteroid belt. Dozens of invisible ships were being built simultaneously, each one a masterpiece of impossible engineering. The Shadow Fleet had grown from humanity's desperate last resort to the most powerful military force in the galaxy. But power brought responsibility, and responsibility brought difficult choices. The secret committee that controlled Project Lazarus was already debating whether to reveal the Shadow Fleet's existence to humanity's allies or maintain the fiction that Earth was defended only by conventional forces. On Earth itself, life had returned to normal with surprising speed. The average citizen knew only that alien invaders had mysteriously retreated after demanding surrender. Government propaganda suggested that diplomatic negotiations had convinced the hegemony to withdraw, avoiding the need for devastating warfare. President Santos stood in her office overlooking New Geneva, reading classified reports about the Shadow Fleet's continued expansion. Only a handful of world leaders knew the truth about humanity's invisible guardians. The weight of that secret grew heavier each day, especially as other alien species began requesting formal diplomatic contact with Earth. Madam President, we have another communication request from the Alterian Republic, her chief of staff reported. They're offering a mutual defense pact and advanced technology in exchange for protection against hegemony expansion. Santos sighed. The Alterians were the fourth species to make such an offer this month. Word was spreading that Earth possessed mysterious defenses capable of destroying entire fleets, and everyone wanted to be humanity's friend. The problem was that accepting these alliances would require revealing capabilities that were meant to remain hidden. Schedule another meeting with the Shadow Council, she decided. We need to discuss long-term strategy for managing our new galactic reputation. Across the galaxy, the legend continued to grow. On the prison world of Kepler 442c, enslaved populations whispered stories about the shadow demons who had humbled the mighty hegemony. In the free trade zones beyond Vega, merchants carried tales of invisible ships that could appear anywhere, without warning. Some species began to hope that the age of hegemony domination might finally be ending. Others worried that humanity might prove to be an even greater threat than their previous oppressors. Fear and hope spread in equal measure, as the galaxy tried to understand what Earth's victory really meant. The hegemony itself was fracturing under the pressure of defeat. Several client species had declared independence after learning that the invincible fleet could be destroyed. Rebellions were breaking out on occupied worlds as populations realized their oppressors could be beaten. Grand Admiral Corax stood in the Hegemony Strategic Command Center, studying star charts that showed the growing chaos throughout their empire. Red icons marked worlds in open revolt. Yellow markers indicated planets where loyalty was questionable. Even their core systems were reporting unrest as news of the Earth defeat continued spreading. Sir, intelligence reports suggest the humans may possess technology derived from the ancients, his chief analyst reported nervously. The weapon signatures match theoretical projections for ancient war machines. Corax felt his blood chill. The ancients were legendary throughout the galaxy, a species that had vanished millions of years ago after developing technology that seemed like magic to lesser civilizations. If humanity had somehow gained access to ancient knowledge, it would explain their impossible weapons and invisible ships. Double our intelligence gathering efforts on Earth, he ordered, and begin secret negotiations with other major powers. If the humans possess ancient technology, we may need allies to contain this threat. But on Luna Station, Admiral Torres was reading similar intelligence reports about growing galactic tensions. The Shadow Fleet's victory had achieved its primary objective of protecting Earth, but the consequences were spreading far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Reed, what's our current count of Shadow Fleet vessels? She asked her aide. 143 ships operational with 60 more under construction. Dr. Horn's facilities are producing new vessels faster than we can train crews for them. Torres nodded. The Shadow Fleet had become a monster that fed on its own success. Each new threat required more ships, more weapons, more capabilities. What had started as humanity's desperate last resort was becoming the foundation of a galactic empire. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Shadow Council. Reed reported. "They're requesting your immediate presence for an emergency session." Torres suspected she knew what the emergency was. Intelligence reports suggested that at least 6 major alien powers were forming a coalition to deal with the Earth threat. The Shadow Fleet's perfect victory was about to become the catalyst for a much larger war. As she prepared to leave for the classified meeting, Torres looked out at Earth hanging in space below. 3 billion people living their daily lives, completely unaware that their world had become the center of galactic politics. They didn't know that invisible ships patrolled the darkness around their planet, or that their survival depended on weapons that existed in the spaces between dimensions. The Shadow Fleet had saved humanity from conquest, but in doing so had transformed Earth from an insignificant backwater into a major galactic power. Whether that transformation would ultimately prove to be salvation or curse remained to be seen. In the asteroid belt, Captain Cross stood on the bridge of the Wraith, watching his invisible fleet patrol the edges of the solar system. 50 ships had grown to over 100, and the number was increasing daily. Each vessel was a guardian angel that no enemy could see coming, a protector that struck from shadows and vanished without trace. The galaxy had learned to fear the Shadow Fleet, but Cross knew that fear was a double-edged weapon. It kept enemies at bay, but it also made humanity a target for those who believed that invisible threats had to be eliminated before they grew too powerful. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system," his tactical officer reported. "Multiple contacts, origin unknown." Cross smiled grimly. The Shadow Fleet had sent one message to the galaxy. Now it seemed the galaxy was ready to send a response. Whether the new arrivals were friends seeking alliance or enemies planning attack, they would soon learn that Earth's guardians were always watching, always ready, and always invisible until the moment they chose to strike. The age of hiding in shadows was ending. The time for choosing sides had begun.